The blood-red sun dipped below the jagged horizon as Emma Northcott slumped against the weathered trunk of a cottonwood tree. Her once pristine blue dress now tattered and stained with the dust of 3 days' desperate travel. Her cracked lips parted slightly as she gazed at the approaching figure on horseback, a tall silhouette against the dying light that represented either her salvation or her end. Colorado Territory, 1876. Emma had fled Denver with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small bundle of possessions after her stepfather's gambling debts had led to an arrangement she couldn't bear to honor. Marriage to Cecil Hammond, a man 3 times her age with a reputation for cruelty that extended well beyond the saloons and brothels he frequented, was a fate she would rather die than accept. And death, it seemed, might be exactly what awaited her after her horse had gone lame 10 miles back, leaving her to continue on foot through the unforgiving landscape. The rider approached slowly, his stallion's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust that caught the last rays of sunlight. Emma's vision blurred as she tried to focus on the man's face, but exhaustion and dehydration had taken their toll. Her final thought before consciousness slipped away was that at least she had died on her own terms. When Emma next opened her eyes, she found herself in a small, rustic cabin. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across rough-hewn walls. She was lying on a narrow bed covered with a worn but clean quilt. Her mouth felt less parched, and someone had cleaned the dirt from her face and hands. "You're awake." The deep voice came from a chair beside the hearth, where a man sat with a steaming cup in his hand. He rose and moved into the light, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, yet somehow still youthful beneath a shock of dark hair. His eyes, a startling shade of green, regarded her with cautious concern. "Where?" Emma's voice cracked and she swallowed painfully. "Easy now," the man said, approaching with a cup of water. "Small sips." He supported her head gently as she drank. "You're at my homestead, about 30 miles south of Silverdale. Name's Gabriel Reed. Found you half dead under that old cottonwood near Crow Creek." Emma took the water gratefully, her fingers trembling. "Emma Northcott," she whispered when she could speak again. "Thank you for save your strength," Gabriel interrupted, his voice gruff but not unkind. "You've been through hell by the looks of it. Whatever you're running from, it can wait till morning." Emma wanted to protest, to explain the urgency of her situation, but exhaustion claimed her once more as she sank back into the pillow. The next time she woke, sunlight streamed through a small window. Emma felt stronger, though her body ached as if she'd been trampled by a herd of cattle. She managed to sit up, taking in her surroundings more fully. The cabin was simple but clean, with a few pieces of hand-crafted furniture, shelves lined with books, an unexpected luxury in these parts, and various tools of ranch life hanging on the walls. Gabriel entered, ducking his tall frame through the low doorway. He carried a tray with a bowl of something that smelled delicious and a chunk of bread. "You look a sight better than yesterday," he observed, setting the tray beside her. "Thought you might manage some stew." "Thank you," Emma said, embarrassed by how eagerly she reached for the food. "I don't know how to eat first," Gabriel said, that same gruff tone barely masking what seemed to be genuine concern. "Talk later." Emma didn't need to be told twice. She ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger as her body responded to the nourishment. Gabriel watched silently, his expression unreadable. When she'd finished, Emma gathered her courage. "Mr. Reed, I appreciate your kindness more than I can say, but I need to be moving on. There are men who might be looking for me, and I won't bring trouble to your door." Gabriel's eyebrow arched slightly. "Miss Northcott, you can barely stand, let alone travel. And in case you haven't noticed, there's nowhere to go for miles around except Silverdale, which isn't much more than a general store and a saloon." He paused. "Whatever trouble you're in, you're safe here for now. My nearest neighbor is 10 miles away, and I don't get many visitors." Emma hesitated, weighing her options. The truth was, she had nowhere to go. Her original plan had been to reach her cousin in Santa Fe, but that was still hundreds of miles away, and she had no horse, little money, and no means of supporting herself along the way. "I can work," she said finally. I'm not afraid of hard labor. I could cook, clean, help with whatever needs doing until I'm strong enough to continue my journey. Gabriel regarded her thoughtfully. Got no need for a housekeeper, he said. Then, seeing her face fall, he added, but my regular hand broke his leg last month and I could use help with the horses. You know anything about horses, Miss Northcott? Emma nodded eagerly. I grew up on a farm outside St. Louis. I've been riding since I could walk, and I helped my father train our draft horses before. She trailed off, the memory of her father's death still raw even after 5 years. Before, Gabriel prompted, before he died, influenza 5 years ago. My mother remarried a year later and we moved to Denver. Emma didn't elaborate on what had happened after that, and Gabriel didn't press. All right then, he said after a moment. You can stay till you're stronger, help with the horses if you're able. But I should warn you, if you've got the law after you, I won't harbor a fugitive. It's not the law, Emma assured him. Just men who believe they own what they haven't paid for. Something darkened in Gabriel's eyes, a flash of understanding or perhaps memory. Get some rest, he said, turning toward the door. Tomorrow's soon enough to start earning your keep. Only when he had gone did Emma realize she'd been given his bed. The thought brought a flush to her cheeks, but exhaustion soon overcame embarrassment and she drifted back to sleep. The next week passed in a blur of gradual recovery. Emma discovered that Gabriel's homestead was larger than she'd initially thought, a modest ranch with a small herd of cattle, but primarily focused on breeding and training horses. The main house was the cabin she'd first woken in, but there was also a barn, corral, smokehouse, and a smaller bunkhouse where, she learned, Gabriel had been sleeping while she occupied his bed. As her strength returned, Emma began helping with small tasks around the ranch. Gabriel was a man of few words, but his actions spoke of a deep kindness beneath his rough exterior. He never questioned her about her past, though she often caught him watching her with curious eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. By the second week, Emma was strong enough to help with the horses, and she discovered a genuine talent for working with the more spirited animals. There was a particularly stubborn Palomino mare that had resisted Gabriel's training for weeks, but she responded to Emma's gentle persistence, allowing her to place a saddle on her back by the third day. You've got a way with her, Gabriel observed, leaning against the corral fence as Emma led the mare in circles, gradually accustoming her to the weight of a rider. Been trying to break that one for a month. Emma smiled, stroking the mare's golden neck. She doesn't need breaking, just understanding. She's scared, not mean. Gabriel's eyes softened as he watched her. Seems like a lot of creatures are that way. Their eyes met briefly over the horse's back, and something passed between them, an unspoken recognition. Emma looked away first, her cheeks warming. In the 10 days she'd been at the ranch, this was the closest they'd come to acknowledging the growing connection between them. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson, Gabriel finally asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. Who are you running from, Emma? She stiffened slightly, but found she wanted to tell him the truth. My stepfather arranged my marriage to a man named Cecil Hammond, a businessman from Denver, though that's too respectable a word for what he does. She stared out at the horizon. Hammond owns gambling houses, saloons, and brothels across 3 territories. He's known for his cruelty, especially to women. My stepfather lost a significant sum to him at cards and offered me as payment. Gabriel's jaw tightened, his hands clenching on the arms of his chair. And the law allows such things. The law sees a legal marriage contract signed by my guardian. I'm 20 years old, Mr. Reed. In the eyes of the law, my stepfather had every right to arrange my marriage. Gabriel, he corrected quietly. And no man has the right to sell another human being, no matter what the law says. Emma smiled sadly. I agree, that's why I ran. I took what little money I had saved, stole one of my stepfather's horses, and fled. I was headed to Santa Fe where my cousin lives, but the horse went lame and she gestured helplessly. You know the rest. Gabriel was silent for a long moment, watching the last light fade from the sky. They'll be looking for you, he said finally. Men like that don't let go of what they believe is theirs. I know, Emma whispered. That's why I can't stay much longer. I've imposed on your kindness far too long already. Gabriel turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the growing darkness. You're not an imposition, Emma. You've more than earned your keep. He paused. And you're welcome to stay as long as you need. The simple words carried a weight that made Emma's heart beat faster. Thank you, she said softly. That night, lying in Gabriel's bed, which he had still refused to reclaim, despite her protests, Emma realized something had shifted between them. In sharing her story, she had crossed a boundary, moving from stranger to what friend? She wasn't sure, but the thought of leaving the ranch now filled her with an unexpected sadness. The following day brought change in the form of a visitor. Emma was brushing down the Palomino mare, whom she'd named Sunflower, when she heard the sound of an approaching horse. She tensed immediately, old fears resurfacing, but Gabriel emerged from the barn and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It's just Elijah Morgan, the general store owner from Silverdale, comes out once a month to trade news and supplies. Indeed, the approaching rider was an older man with a salt and pepper beard, riding a mule laden with parcels. He greeted Gabriel warmly, then turned curious eyes on Emma. New hand? He asked, dismounting stiffly. Gabriel nodded. Emma Northcott, been helping with the horses. Elijah tipped his hat. Madam, don't often see women out in these parts, especially not ones working stock. Emma smiled politely. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Morgan. They shared a meal, during which Elijah regaled them with news from town and beyond. Most of it was trivial: who had married, who had moved on, the price of grain, but one piece of information made Emma's blood run cold. Had some fancy city men come through Silverdale last week, Elijah mentioned between bites of stew. Looking for a young woman, they said, offering a substantial reward for information, said she stole a valuable horse and some family heirlooms. He chuckled. Course, they were asking in all the wrong places. Nobody out here pays much mind to strangers' business. Emma kept her expression neutral, though her hands trembled slightly as she refilled the coffee cups. Gabriel's eyes met hers briefly, a silent message passing between them: say nothing. After Elijah departed with promises to return in a month, Gabriel found Emma in the barn, frantically saddling Sunflower. What are you doing? He asked, though the answer was obvious. I have to leave, Emma said, her voice tight with fear. They're getting closer. Hammond's men won't stop looking, and I won't put you in danger. Gabriel moved closer, gently taking the saddle from her trembling hands. Emma, think. You heard Morgan, those men were in Silverdale a week ago. They've likely moved on by now, and even if they haven't, riding out alone is exactly what they'd expect. What choice do I have? Emma demanded, tears of frustration gathering in her eyes. Stay here until they find me, until they burn your ranch to the ground for helping me. We have choices, Gabriel said firmly. First, we wait, see if they return or move on. Second, we prepare just in case. He set the saddle aside. And third, we consider that maybe you don't have to run anymore. Emma stared at him, not understanding. What do you mean? Gabriel took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for something difficult. There's another option, a legal one that would make Hammond's claim on you null and void. It took a moment for his meaning to register, and when it did, Emma's eyes widened. Marriage. Are you suggesting not like that? Gabriel said quickly, a flush spreading across his tanned face. A marriage of convenience, on paper only. You'd have my name and protection, but nothing else would change. When it's safe, if you still want to go to Santa Fe, I wouldn't stop you. Emma was speechless. The offer was shocking, generous beyond measure, and yet something about it felt wrong, though not for the reasons she might have expected. Why would you do that for me? She finally managed. Gabriel looked away, his discomfort clear. Because it's the right thing to do. And because... He trailed off, then met her gaze directly. Because in the short time you've been here, you've brought something to this place that was missing. I'm not asking anything of you, Emma, just offering a solution. Emma studied his face, seeing the genuine concern there, but also something deeper that he was struggling to express. I need time to think, she said quietly. Gabriel nodded. Take all the time you need, but remember, if those men return, time may be something we don't have much of. That night, sleep eluded Emma. Gabriel's proposal circled in her mind like a hawk, revealing new angles each time she examined it. A marriage of convenience was a practical solution to her immediate problem. With Gabriel's name and the legal protection it afforded, Hammond's claim on her would indeed be void. But the thought of such an arrangement left her feeling hollow. The truth, which Emma had been reluctant to acknowledge even to herself, was that her feelings for Gabriel had grown far beyond gratitude. His quiet strength, his kindness, the way his rare smiles transformed his solemn face, all these had worked their way into her heart. The idea of a marriage in name only, living beside him as a stranger sharing his roof but not his life, seemed suddenly unbearable. Dawn found her still awake, her decision made. She dressed quickly and went to find Gabriel, who was already at work in the corral, training a young gelding. "I've been thinking about your proposal," Emma said without preamble. Gabriel turned, his expression guarded. "And I'm grateful beyond words for your offer, but I can't accept it." Something flickered in Gabriel's eyes, disappointment perhaps, though he masked it quickly. "I understand. It was presumptuous of me." "No," Emma said quickly, "that's not why." She took a deep breath. "I won't marry for convenience or protection, not even to a man as good as you, Gabriel. I've seen what becomes of such arrangements. My mother's second marriage was one of necessity, and it brought her nothing but sorrow." Gabriel nodded slowly. "I respect that. We'll find another way to keep you safe." "There's something else," Emma continued, her heart pounding. "These past weeks I've never felt so at home anywhere, not since my father died, and it's not just this place, it's—" She faltered, courage failing her. Gabriel stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "It's what, Emma? It's you," she admitted softly. "Your kindness, your strength. The way you speak to the horses, the books you read by lamplight, how you always ensure I have enough blankets even though you're sleeping in the bunkhouse." She smiled tremulously. "I don't want a marriage of convenience, Gabriel. If I were to marry, it would be for love." Gabriel was very still, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Emma nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. A transformation came over Gabriel's face, the guarded mask falling away to reveal such naked hope and joy that Emma's breath caught. "I never dared hope," he said quietly. "You were like a wild thing that wandered onto my land, beautiful, frightened, liable to bolt at any sudden move. I told myself I was offering marriage to protect you, but the truth is far more selfish." His hand tightened around hers. "I don't want you to go, Emma, not ever." Emma stepped closer, her free hand coming to rest against his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palm. "Then ask me properly, Gabriel Reed." For the first time since she'd known him, Gabriel smiled fully, the expression lighting his entire face. "Emma Northcott, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not for convenience, not for protection, but because I find myself falling in love with you more each day." "Yes," Emma whispered, tears of joy spilling onto her cheeks. "Yes, I will." The kiss that followed was tentative at first, a gentle question, then deepened as they both surrendered to feelings that had been building since that first night under the cottonwood tree. The next few days passed in a blur of planning and quiet happiness. They agreed to ride to Silverdale at week's end to find the circuit preacher who visited the town once a month. It would be a simple ceremony with Elijah Morgan and his wife as witnesses, followed by a return to the ranch to begin their life together. But fate had other plans. On the fourth morning after their engagement, as dawn broke over the eastern plains, the sound of approaching riders shattered their newfound peace. Gabriel was already awake, tending to the morning chores when he spotted the dust cloud in the distance. His first thought was Indians, but as the riders drew closer, he could make out the shapes of 4 men on horseback, dressed in the fashion of city dwellers rather than the usual rough clothing of the territory. He ran to the cabin where Emma was preparing breakfast. "Riders coming, 4 of them. Looks like the men Morgan mentioned." Emma's face drained of color. "Hammond's men, they found me." Gabriel's jaw set in a hard line. "We don't know that for certain, but best to be prepared. Stay inside." "Gabriel, no," Emma protested. "If it's them, they're dangerous." I've faced worse than city thugs, Gabriel said grimly. Stay inside, bar the door, and have my shotgun ready, but don't use it unless there's no other choice. Before Emma could argue further, he strode out to the porch, his hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. By the time the riders reached the yard, he was leaning against a post, the picture of rural nonchalance. "Morning, gentlemen," he called as they reined in their horses. "You're a long way from anywhere. Can I help you with something?" The lead rider, a thin man with cold eyes and an expensive suit, surveyed the ranch with obvious disdain. "Perhaps. We're looking for a young woman who might have passed this way, dark hair, blue eyes, traveling alone, stole a valuable horse and some family jewelry. Name's Emma Northcott." Gabriel's expression revealed nothing. "Haven't seen anyone fitting that description. Not many travelers come this way. You're the first in over a month." The man's eyes narrowed skeptically. "Mind if we have a look around? There's a substantial reward for information leading to her recovery." "I mind considerably," Gabriel replied evenly. "This is private property." "We have authorization from the territorial marshal," the man said, producing a paper from his coat pocket. "This woman is wanted for theft." Gabriel took the paper, examining it carefully. It appeared legitimate, though he knew such documents could be easily forged. "Says here you're looking for a thief. Doesn't authorize you to search private property without cause." The man's facade of politeness slipped slightly. "Mr. Reed, Gabriel Reed." "Mr. Reed, I'm Samuel Watts, private investigator employed by Mr. Cecil Hammond of Denver. The young woman we're seeking is his betrothed, who fled before their wedding with valuable property. We have reason to believe she may have sought shelter in this area." Gabriel handed the paper back. "As I said, I haven't seen her, and while I sympathize with Mr. Hammond's situation, I don't allow strangers to wander my property. So unless you have specific evidence she's here, I'll have to ask you to move along." Watts signaled, and two of his companions dismounted, hands hovering near their weapons. "I'm afraid we must insist, Mr. Reed. Mr. Hammond is not a patient man, and we've been searching for nearly a month." The tension in the yard was palpable, like the air before a lightning strike. Gabriel didn't move, but his stance shifted subtly, weight balanced, ready for whatever came next. "This is still my land," he said quietly, "and you're still trespassing. I've answered your questions, now leave." One of the men drew his pistol, but before he could raise it, Gabriel's revolver was in his hand, aimed steadily at Watts's chest. "That would be a mistake," Gabriel warned. Watts raised a placating hand. "Holster your weapon, Jenkins, no need for bloodshed." To Gabriel, he said, "You're either a very brave man or a very foolish one, Mr. Reed. There are 4 of us and one of you." "2," came Emma's voice from the cabin doorway. She stood with Gabriel's shotgun leveled at the intruders, her hands steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "And I know how to use this." Watts's eyes lit with recognition and triumph. "Ah, Miss Northcott, there you are. Your stepfather and Mr. Hammond have been most concerned about your impulsive departure." Emma stepped forward, the shotgun never wavering. "I'm sure they're concerned about their investments, not my welfare. You can tell Hammond that I will never be his wife." "That's not your decision to make," Watts said coldly. "The contract is legally binding. Now put down that weapon and come with us peacefully." "I'd hate for anyone to get hurt because of your stubbornness." Gabriel's voice was steel. "She's not going anywhere with you." Watts regarded him with new interest. "I see, you've taken a fancy to the girl. Well, I can understand that she's quite lovely, but she's spoken for, Mr. Reed." "Hammond paid good money for her. She's not property," Gabriel growled. "She's a free woman who can make her own choices, and she's chosen to stay here." Emma moved to stand beside Gabriel, their shoulders nearly touching. "Tell my stepfather and Hammond that I'm getting married, to Gabriel." "The contract will be void," Watts laughed. "A clever attempt, but I'm afraid it won't work. You can't marry without your guardian's consent, not at your age, and your stepfather has already given that consent to Mr. Hammond." "That's where you're wrong," Gabriel said. "The territorial law here states that a woman of 19 years or older can marry without consent if she's been living independently for more than 30 days. It was a gamble. Gabriel wasn't entirely certain of the law, but he'd heard something to that effect from a judge who'd stayed at the ranch the previous year. The doubt that flickered across Watts's face suggested the bluff might be working. Even if that's true, which I doubt, Miss Northcott hasn't been living independently for 30 days. She's been hiding here, a fugitive. She's been employed here as my ranch hand, Gabriel countered. I have the ledger showing her wages and the date of her hiring, more than 30 days ago now. This was an outright lie, but Gabriel maintained such a convincing expression that Watts hesitated. Furthermore, Gabriel continued, pressing his advantage, I've already filed the necessary papers in Silverdale. We're to be married this Sunday by the circuit preacher. You're welcome to attend if you'd like to object formally. Emma glanced at him, surprised by the elaborate fabrication but quick to play along. My cousin in Santa Fe has also been notified. She's a respected schoolteacher there and will testify to my character if needed. Watts's confidence was visibly wavering, but he rallied. This changes nothing. Miss Northcott still took property that wasn't hers, a valuable horse and jewelry. The horse went lame and was left near Crow Creek, Emma said. As for jewelry, I took only what was mine, gifts from my father before he died. I have the letters proving they were meant for me on my 18th birthday. Another bluff, but delivered with such conviction that even Gabriel almost believed it. The standoff continued, tension crackling in the air. Finally, Watts signaled his men to mount up. This isn't over, Miss Northcott. Mr. Hammond is not a man who accepts defeat easily. We'll be looking into these claims of yours, and if they prove false, as I suspect they will return with the territorial marshal. You do that, Gabriel said evenly, his gun still trained on them. And in the meantime, spread the word that Miss Northcott is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her will answer to me. Watts's face darkened with anger, but he recognized the futility of pushing further. With a curt nod, he turned his horse and rode out, his men following. Only when the riders were distant specks on the horizon did Gabriel and Emma lower their weapons. Emma was trembling now, the fear she'd suppressed during the confrontation washing over her in waves. Do you think they believed us? She asked. Gabriel put an arm around her shoulders. No, but we bought some time. They'll check the law, find holes in our story, and be back. But not today and probably not tomorrow. We need to move quickly. What do we do? Gabriel's expression was grim but determined. We make our lies into truth. We ride to Silverdale now, find Judge Wilson if he's still in town, and get those papers filed. Then we find the preacher and get married, today if possible. Emma looked up at him, uncertainty in her eyes. Gabriel, I don't want you to marry me just because of this. If you've changed your mind, Gabriel silenced her with a kiss, brief but fierce. I haven't changed my mind. I want to marry you because I love you, Emma Northcott. The timing isn't what I'd planned, but the intention is the same. Relief flooded Emma's face. I love you too, Gabriel Reed. Within the hour, they were on horseback heading for Silverdale, Gabriel on his stallion and Emma on Sunflower, who had proven herself a reliable mount despite her initial wildness. They rode hard, knowing that time was their most precious commodity. Silverdale was little more than a dusty main street lined with a handful of buildings: the general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and a combination courthouse and jail. To their immense relief, the territorial circuit judge was indeed in town, preparing to leave the following day. Judge Wilson was a pragmatic man who had seen enough of frontier life to understand desperate situations. When Gabriel explained their predicament, though with a sanitized version that omitted the armed standoff, the judge listened carefully. So you're saying this young woman is being forced into marriage by her stepfather to settle gambling debts? The judge asked, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. Yes, Your Honor, Gabriel confirmed. The man she's promised to is Cecil Hammond, a known criminal from Denver. The judge's expression darkened. Hammond, eh? I've heard that name. Nothing good, he studied Emma. And you, young lady, you wish to marry Mr. Reed of your own free will. I do, Your Honor, Emma said firmly. We had planned to wait to court properly, but circumstances have forced our hand. Judge Wilson sighed heavily. The law on these matters is complex. Your stepfather does have certain rights as your guardian, but forcing you into marriage to settle debts. He shook his head in disgust. That borders on human trafficking, not proper guardianship. He thought for a moment longer, then nodded decisively. I'll issue the license and waive the usual waiting period, but you'll need to find someone to perform the ceremony. Preacher Johnson won't be through town for another 2 weeks. Gabriel and Emma exchanged worried glances. 2 weeks was too long. Hammond's men would surely return before then. Isn't there anyone else who can perform a legal marriage? Gabriel asked. The judge stroked his beard thoughtfully. Well, as it happens, I'm authorized to perform civil ceremonies myself. Not as fancy as a church wedding, but just as binding in the eyes of the law. Relief washed over them both. That would be perfect, Your Honor, Emma said eagerly. All right then, the judge said, rising from his desk. Let's get the paperwork in order. You'll need witnesses. Elijah Morgan and his wife might be willing, Gabriel suggested. An hour later, in the small, dusty courtroom at the back of the jailhouse, Emma Northcott and Gabriel Reed were married in a simple ceremony witnessed by Elijah Morgan, his wife Martha, and the town's young deputy sheriff. Emma wore the same blue dress she'd arrived in, now mended and cleaned, with wildflowers hastily gathered by Martha to form a small bouquet. Gabriel had done his best to make himself presentable, shaving carefully and wearing his one good shirt. When Judge Wilson pronounced them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed Emma with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. It wasn't the wedding either of them had imagined, but in that moment it felt perfect nonetheless. Mrs. Reed, Gabriel whispered, testing the sound of her new name. Emma smiled through her tears. Mr. Reed. They stayed the night at Silverdale's small hotel, their first night as husband and wife spent in a narrow bed with a sagging mattress and thin walls through which they could hear the revelry from the saloon next door. Yet despite the humble surroundings, there was a sacredness to their union that transformed the shabby room into something magical. In the morning, they rode back to the ranch, marriage certificates safely stored in Gabriel's saddlebag. The knowledge that they were legally bound offered some protection, but both knew that men like Hammond wouldn't necessarily respect legal niceties. What happens now? Emma asked as they approached the homestead, the familiar buildings coming into view. Gabriel reached across to take her hand. Now we live our lives, Emma, together, and if Hammond or his men return, we face them together too. The next few weeks passed in a blur of domestic happiness interwoven with vigilance. Gabriel taught Emma to shoot his revolver, insisting she practice daily until she could hit a can at 20 paces. They took turns keeping watch, never leaving the ranch unattended. But they also found time for joy-shared meals, evenings reading by the fire, long talks under the stars, and the gradual discovery of each other as husband and wife. Emma proved to be not just skilled with horses, but adept at all aspects of ranch life. She organized Gabriel's chaotic bookkeeping, planted a vegetable garden that thrived in the harsh soil, and even began teaching the neighboring ranchers' children one day a week when they discovered she had been trained as a teacher before her father's death. Gabriel, for his part, found himself opening up in ways he never had before. He told Emma of his childhood in Boston, his father's shipping business, and how he'd fled west at 18 after a falling out that still pained him to discuss. He spoke of his dreams for the ranch, of breeding horses that combined strength with intelligence, and of someday building a larger house with rooms for children. Children? Emma had asked, her eyes soft in the lamplight. Gabriel had flushed, suddenly uncertain. If you want them. I never thought much about it before, but now. Emma had silenced him with a kiss. I want them too, our children. Summer faded into fall, and as the aspens in the distant mountains turned gold, they began to hope that perhaps Hammond had given up. Elijah Morgan reported that no strangers had passed through Silverdale asking questions, and the territorial marshal who visited confirmed that no warrants had been issued for Emma's arrest. Then, on a crisp October morning, as Emma was hanging laundry while Gabriel repaired a broken fence near the corral, the sound of approaching horses once again broke their hard-won peace. This time it was 6 riders, with Samuel Watts at their head, and beside him, a heavyset man with a florid face and cold eyes that Emma recognized with a jolt of terror. Cecil Hammond had come himself. Gabriel. She called, dropping the wet shirt she'd been about to hang and running toward the house where the shotgun was kept. Gabriel saw the riders and sprinted back to the yard, intercepting Emma before she reached the cabin. "Get inside," he said urgently. "Bar the door and don't come out no matter what you hear." "No," Emma said fiercely. "I won't hide while you face them alone. He's here for me. This is my fight, too." Gabriel looked as though he wanted to argue, but the riders were almost upon them. "Stay behind me," he said finally, positioning himself between Emma and the approaching men. Hammond reined in his horse, looking down at them with contemptuous amusement. He was older than Emma had expected, perhaps 50, with the bloated face of a heavy drinker and eyes like chips of ice. "Miss Northcott," he said, his voice surprisingly refined for such a brutal-looking man. "How charming to finally meet you in person. Your stepfather's description didn't do you justice." Gabriel's hand moved to his gun. "Her name is Mrs. Reed now, and you're trespassing on our property." Hammond's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ah yes, the hasty marriage. Watts informed me of your creative solution to our little problem." He dismounted slowly, his movements suggesting he was unused to riding long distances. "Unfortunately, it changes nothing." The contract was signed before this alleged marriage took place, making it the prior claim. "There's nothing alleged about our marriage," Emma said, stepping forward despite Gabriel's protective arm. "We were legally wed by Judge Wilson in Silverdale. The certificate is registered with the territorial court." Hammond waved a dismissive hand. "Legalities can be adjusted, my dear. I've found that most officials in these territories are quite reasonable when properly compensated." His cold gaze shifted to Gabriel. "And most obstacles can be removed when necessary." The threat was unmistakable. Gabriel tensed, his voice deadly quiet when he spoke. "You should leave now, Hammond, while you still can." Hammond sighed as if disappointed by Gabriel's lack of cooperation. "Mr. Reed, I understand you've developed feelings for the girl. It's quite natural. She's very pretty. I'm not an unreasonable man. I'm prepared to offer you compensation for your inconvenience." "She's not for sale," Gabriel said through gritted teeth. "Everything has a price," Hammond insisted. "Name yours." Emma's voice shook with fury. "I am not property to be bought and sold. I made my choice and I choose Gabriel." Hammond's facade of civility slipped, revealing the cruelty beneath. "Your choice is irrelevant, girl. You were promised to me and I always collect what I'm owed." He turned to his men. "Search the house. Find the marriage certificate and any other documents they might try to use against us." Two men dismounted and started toward the cabin. Gabriel drew his gun, aiming it at the closest one. "Take one more step and I'll put a bullet in you." The men hesitated, looking to Hammond for guidance. The businessman smiled thinly. "You're outnumbered, Reed. Even if you manage to shoot one or two of my men, the others will kill you, and then where will your pretty wife be?" "Widowed and alone, with no protection." "She won't be alone," came a new voice from behind them. Everyone turned to see a group of riders approaching from the east, 4 men on horseback, led by Elijah Morgan and the young deputy sheriff from Silverdale. Behind them rode 2 of the neighboring ranchers Gabriel had helped during difficult times. "What's the meaning of this?" Hammond demanded as the newcomers formed a line between his men and the cabin. The deputy, barely 25 but with a steady hand on his rifle, spoke with quiet authority. "Mr. Morgan rode out to the neighboring ranches when he saw your group pass through town, said there might be trouble at the Reed place." His eyes flicked to Gabriel. "Everything all right here, Reed?" Gabriel nodded, relief evident in his face. "These men were just leaving, Deputy Taylor. Mr. Hammond here seems to have some confusion about my wife's status." Deputy Taylor studied Hammond with undisguised suspicion. "Your wife would be Mrs. Reed, formerly Miss Northcott." "That's right." The deputy reached into his saddlebag and produced an official-looking document. "Well then, this might clear things up. Judge Wilson asked me to deliver this to you when it came through. It's a ruling from the territorial court invalidating any prior marriage contracts made on Miss Northcott's behalf without her consent." The judge was quite concerned about the circumstances you described and took the liberty of forwarding the case to the territorial governor. Hammond's face contorted with rage. That's impossible. I have connections, not in this territory you don't, the deputy interrupted calmly. The governor takes a dim view of forced marriages, says it's too much like slavery, which, as you know, is illegal throughout the United States. Emma could scarcely believe what she was hearing. Judge Wilson had gone far beyond simply performing their marriage. He had actively intervened on their behalf with the highest authority in the territory. Hammond looked from the deputy to his own men, calculating the odds. He was outnumbered now, and while his men might be willing to threaten an isolated rancher, confronting a deputy sheriff and armed locals was another matter entirely. "This isn't over," he snarled, turning to Emma. "No one makes a fool of Cecil Hammond." "You've done that yourself," Gabriel said coldly. "Now get off my land before I have the deputy arrest you for trespassing and threatening my wife." For a moment, it seemed Hammond might refuse, his face purpling with impotent rage. Then, abruptly, he turned and remounted his horse. "Watts, we're leaving." To Gabriel and Emma, he added, "Enjoy your victory while it lasts. These territories are changing. Civilization is coming, and with it, men like me. Your kind are dying out, Reed." "Maybe so," Gabriel replied evenly, "but not today." They watched in tense silence as Hammond and his men rode away, not relaxing until they were out of sight. Only then did Gabriel turn to the deputy and Elijah. "How did you know?" he asked. Elijah grinned. "Saw him ride through town, asking directions to your place." Recognized that Watts fellow from before, and the fat one had the look of trouble about him. "Figured you might appreciate some friendly faces." The deputy nodded in agreement. Judge Wilson left specific instructions before he moved on to the next town. "Said to keep an eye out for any trouble heading your way." He handed Gabriel the document. "This is real, by the way. The governor signed it himself last week." Emma, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, felt tears threatening. "I don't know how to thank you all." One of the neighboring ranchers, a gruff man named Peterson who rarely spoke more than 2 words together, surprised her by saying, "No need for thanks. Reed here pulled my youngest out of the creek last spring when the floods came. We take care of our own in these parts." Gabriel clasped each man's hand in turn, his gratitude evident in the gesture. "You're welcome at our table anytime, all of you." After their allies had departed with promises to stay alert for any sign of Hammond's return, Gabriel and Emma stood in the yard, still processing what had happened. "Do you think it's really over?" Emma asked, leaning against Gabriel's solid warmth. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Hammond doesn't strike me as a man who gives up easily, but with the governor's ruling, he has no legal claim on you anymore. And he's seen that we're not isolated out here, we have friends, allies." Emma nodded, hoping he was right. "I feel like I can finally breathe," she admitted. "Like I've been holding my breath since I left Denver, even after we married." Gabriel turned to face her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You're safe now, Emma. This is your home, these are your people, and I am your husband. Nothing and no one can change that." The conviction in his voice washed over her like a healing balm. For the first time since her father's death, Emma felt truly secure, truly home. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their cabin, Gabriel propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. "There's something I've been wanting to tell you," he said softly. Emma gazed up at him, noting the unusual hesitation in his expression. "What is it?" "When I found you that day, under the cottonwood tree, you were barely conscious. You tried to thank me, but you were too weak to get the words out." His fingers traced the line of her cheek tenderly. "I told you then that you didn't need to thank me, that you already had." Emma frowned slightly, trying to recall. "I don't remember that," Gabriel smiled. "You wouldn't. You were delirious with heat and exhaustion, but I meant it, Emma. You thanked me just by surviving, by fighting to live. And every day since then, you've thanked me by bringing life and joy to this place that was just existing before you came." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she reached up to touch his face. "I love you, Gabriel Reed." "And I love you, Emma Reed," he replied, bending to kiss her with infinite tenderness. Spring came early the following year, bringing with it new life and new beginnings. The vegetable garden Emma had planted flourished, as did the wildflower meadow she'd cultivated near the creek. Gabriel's horse breeding business was thriving, with Sunflower producing a promising foal that showed all the spirit of its mother and the strength of Gabriel's best stallion. They had expanded the cabin over the winter, adding a second bedroom and a proper kitchen. Gabriel had even ordered a piano from Denver, arriving on a freight wagon after the snow melted, a surprise for Emma, who had mentioned once that she used to play as a girl. The threat from Hammond had not materialized again, though they remained vigilant. Deputy Taylor, who rode out periodically to check on the more isolated homesteads, reported that Hammond had apparently returned to Denver after failing to convince the territorial authorities to support his claim. Emma's cousin from Santa Fe had visited at Christmas, bringing news that Emma's stepfather had died of apoplexy, leaving his second wife destitute, a fitting end for a man who had tried to sell his stepdaughter to cover gambling debts. On a warm May morning, as they sat on the expanded porch watching the sun rise over the eastern plains, Emma took Gabriel's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I have news," she said softly, watching his face. Gabriel's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Are you certain?" Emma nodded, her smile radiant. "The baby should come around Christmas time. Dr. Simmons confirmed it yesterday when I went into town." Joy spread across Gabriel's face, transforming his usually solemn features. He gathered Emma into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious material on earth. "A baby," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Our baby." Emma rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Our family," she corrected gently. In that moment, with the sun warming their faces and the promise of new life growing within her, Emma thought back to that desperate day nearly a year ago when she had collapsed under the cottonwood tree, certain she was about to die. How different her life had become, how full of love and purpose. She had been too weak then to thank the stranger who had saved her life. Now, as Gabriel's wife and the mother of his child, she understood what he had meant that day. Her thanks was in every sunrise they shared, every meal prepared with care, every tender moment between them. It was in the life they had built together and the child they would welcome at year's end. She had thanked him with her love, which was the only gift truly worth giving. Gabriel seemed to follow her thoughts, for he pressed a kiss to her forehead and murmured, "Do you remember what I told you that first day when you tried to thank me for finding you?" Emma smiled up at him, her heart full. "You said I already had." "And you have," Gabriel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Every day since, in 1,000 different ways." He laid his hand once more over the place where their child grew, "And you continue to, in ways I never imagined possible." As the morning light strengthened, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber, Emma and Gabriel Reed sat together on the porch of the home they had made, looking out at the land that had brought them together. Behind them lay the past with all its dangers and sorrows, before them stretched a future bright with promise and hope. And in that perfect moment, no words of thanks were necessary. Their love spoke for itself, in the gentle pressure of clasped hands, in the miracle growing beneath their touch, and in the peace that had come at last to a woman who had once been too weak to thank the cowboy who saved her, until he assured her that she already had.